Hey everyone, it's your girl Maddie here, aka Beaver Mosh, talking to you today about Enveloping Absurdity from the Fargo, North Dakota based death metalers, Phobophilic. Now, to this point, Phobophilic has a couple demos under their belt and a split release with Sedimentum, a band who also had a release not too long ago that was really solid and also would suggest checking out. But this is Phobophilic's debut full length, and it comes off of Prosthetic Records. Now, a lot of people talk about within metal a movement that's been going on for the past, I would say, 10 years or so, within death metal specifically, of bands calling back and being inclined to revisit that more no frills, meat and potatoes, bare bones, death metal style that listeners are familiar with from the classics, the early wave of death metal bands like Deicide and Morbid Angel and Bolt Thrower and Pestilence and acts like those, definitely Entombed. And this movement is often coined the new wave of old school death metal, or, for short, yeah. And Phobophilic definitely sits within that circle of bands. And while, yes, Phobophilic maintains and puts forth a more skeletal and stripped down death metal package, they rise above that moniker and that tag with a lot of moments of being left field and kind of finding their own crevice and ways to stick out and be adventurous. The beginning track, the 6-minute, I believe it's pronounced Antiodrama. The vocals, Aaron Dudgeon. For the most part, these guttural lows, but also surprises a lot with these piercing highs. The track in general goes through a lot of tempo change, which is not a new technique in death metal whatsoever. It's kind of a staple of the genre, but still the way that Phobophilic approaches that technique within this track still gets me and finds ways to catch me off guard, which is impressive. The drumming by Vincent Tweeden, I think, is a huge part of this record as a whole. It sounds really good. There's a lot of clarity. Everything sounds tight. The cymbals are crystal clear. Every piece comes out. And while Tweeden incorporates a lot of your standard death metal blast beats, as you would expect, there's also some groovier moments on this track that they nail with a lot of musicality. The track Those Which Stare Back, it opens with this monstrous riff. The bass line is punchy, it's thick, and then there's this instrumental midsection within this track. The guitars, the bass, and the drums all kind of interact with each other and take turns kind of coming to the front And it's really well composed, well performed, overall, just well executed. On Nauseating Despair, I'm reminded a lot of human era death, with the subtle use here of melodicism and technicality, but not being overly of either of those two descriptions. And when it does slow down on this track a couple times, those slow down sections really stand out and work on me. Just pure stank face and these satisfying headbangs that I can't help it. It just gets me. On Cathedral of Blood, Jesus Christ, the drumming again. Tweeden opens this track up with kind of a mini drum solo, and then as the other pieces of this track come in, Tweeden is just unleashed. Dizzying drum fills, performed with so much composure, and the way that it's maintained and sustained is just it's an accomplishment. The guitar work here kind of reminds me of, I hear some Atheist here, early Atheist. The track Individuation. I love the bass work here from Christian Alm. Now I know this is probably a weird word for me to use to describe something on a record like this, but the bass here is enchanting. It creates this mystifying atmosphere, and somehow that adds to the brutality of this whole thing. I think you just have to hear that in context for it to make sense. And on the closing track, the title track, there's just a nasty breakdown that gets me every single time I hear it. The leads here just stick. It's pure ear candy. It's so tasty. It's so good. So good. Overall, Enveloping Absurdity just sounds really good. There's so much clarity and distinction with all the instruments and all the pieces while they work together. You can definitely pull them apart in your ear and see each one of the individual piece and be impressed by each piece on its own merits. And while there is that kind of polish to this, it still sounds harsh and muddy and pummeling. There's just moments of that make me want to headbang irresistibly over and over again on this thing. Now I can see, and I have seen, people comment on this record and kind of give it a pass and kind of turn their eye towards it for being not the most groundbreaking or quote unquote original. And I'm not going to say that those two things aren't important. They definitely are, and at many times can make an album phenomenal, or can just kind of make an album lose relevance very quickly if they aren't those things. But while saying that, I do think those two critiques within criticism of music as a whole can be overused and overemphasized. Phobophilic just executes here. You can't throw the word generic when describing albums like this, because I think the term generic would imply something that's really clocked in and put together willy-nilly and color by numbers without that, and it would imply that the performance in the album and just the music in general lacks any life or vibrancy, and that is not what is going on here. Phobophilic isn't looking to push things forward as much as they are trying to perfect something that has been happening in metal and is working, and they are trying to dial that in and hone it in. And I think they do that very well on this record. And in that way, this is an exceptional way to modernize these staple sounds that us metal fans have come to love and find solace in. They do call back to the classics, but in a way where it feels like a vital piece of that lineage. I love this record. Yes, 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 I love this record. And I am so excited to see where this band goes next. I hear so much potential. Keep looking out for Phobophilic. Give this thing a listen. Give it another listen after that and listen to it again. This is easily going to be one of my favorite death metal albums of the year. I am so satisfied with what Phobophilic is doing on this album. And those are my thoughts. I'm Maddie, aka Beavermosh. If you would, be so kind, give us a like, subscribe. That would be very appreciated. Give a comment what you thought of this record, any feedback, anything you think I should review, anything I missed. Keep it metal. Once again, this is Beavermosh, signing off.